Hi everyone, my name is Gaia Mosconi. I'm a PhD student at the University of Siegen, where I've been working for the last 6 years as a conceptual designer and researcher in a project called INF, which stands for infrastructure. This paper, titled Designing a Data Story, is one of the major research outcomes of the INF project, and it has been written in collaboration with multiple co-authors, which now I want to thank for their contribution. This paper introduces a design concept called data story, aimed specifically at supporting the ongoing curation, sharing, and potential reuse of qualitative and ethnographic data. The main rationale behind the concept is to allow the curation and sharing of heterogeneous qualitative data accompanied with written narratives or storytelling practices for data contextualization, analysis, and sense-making, but also technical elements and standards such as metadata, tags, and DOI for data curation and retrieval. This research and the design effort which generated the concept itself are motivated by three major elements. First, the increased attention of funding agency and academic institutions on research data management and open science principle, where all major fields and disciplines are nowadays expected to embrace open data policies in order to get funding. Second, existing literature that has identified challenges specifically to the curation and sharing of qualitative data, which involve higher ethical concern, being these data more sensitive and private compared to other types. But also our own work with researchers applying ethnographic research methods, which pointed us to crucial research data management issue they personally face, and who at the same time show us how to pursue the development of curation and data sharing practices in a way that could be fruitful for them and that would resonate better with their own practices. Our context of investigation is a collaborative research center composed by 14 projects with over 60 researchers representing several major disciplines and faculties. As expected by our project proposal, the goal of the INF project is to make possible to embrace the open science agenda, finding a solution that would allow curation and sharing practices to be developed. Our fieldwork followed an ethnographic approach. With our first interviews and observation, we mainly investigated the researcher's data life cycle with a specific focus on curation and sharing practices. Our first insights, published in our previous work, will allow us to discover major gaps that still exist between the open science grand vision and bottom-up research practices observed in the field. It was evident that while research data management practices are expected by all major funding agencies, these practices, though, are not yet supported by any tools that researchers use daily, nor they are integrated in researchers' workflows. And in fact, these practices, if at all, are performed only informally. Consequently, data curation and sharing practices needed to meet the open science agenda are perceived as unrewarding. However, some researchers in the field showed an interest in innovative solutions that might help them represent and share highly heterogeneous research data, initially for their own purposes. They were specifically interested in how to organize different data sources and underpin the work of collaborative interpretations and sense-making. This is where storytelling emerged as a possible design rationale to follow. In fact, what emerged from the field was the central role of narratives that researchers use to describe their own data to other colleagues. Data which are rarely shared in full, even with team members of the same project. However, it is common practice to share data snippets in collaborative analysis sessions with members of the same project or with other researchers. These snippets are anonymized and are enriched with contextual information and sent to participants via email. So through oral and written narratives, qualitative data is constantly evolving and being co-constructed in a collaborative effort that can engage team members, advisors, and even study participants. We also notice how researchers have to constantly come up with new techniques and tools in order to assist them in communicating ideas and interpret data in a collaborative manner. For example, an historian who made use of a Trello board to organize this data with thematic section, annotation, and then collaborative discuss with student assistant. What we particularly took from above is that there are already mechanisms in place that researchers have to share the data. But what not happens is the share of data in full, if ever, nor the curation of data with more standards and formal approaches, such as making use of metadata and data description as expected by research management guidelines and policy. Data story as a concept then takes the notion of a story as a design metaphor, and it uses as a sort of inspiration for the representation, organization, and description of partial and situated research data to be shared with colleagues and or with external audiences. It It is not intended as an end-to-end solution, but it seeks to draw upon what already happened naturally and to ingrain it with more structure to make it easier to meeting some of the formal demands associated with research data management and the open science goals. In a nutshell, the relevant components of that data story are the integration of story and metadata standards, which can accompany each chapters and file that we showed previously, a plugin solution that we envision to be implemented for major tools like Microsoft Word and Max Courier in order to support for a workflow, the generation of DOI and different accessibility rights, which will allow researchers to share the data story with different audiences, and finally, the implementation of the data story itself as a module in a collaborative research platform already used in our university and in our CRC. As you will read in the paper, the data story aims at supporting the ongoing curation and sharing by offering a collaborative workflow for data curation, a story-like format that can serve as an organizing principle, and a means of enhancing and naturalizing curation practices through storytelling. As Birnet and Beats have already suggested, to get more effective data sharing system, designers and IT developers need to go beyond current metadata models and takes into account social interactions around data abstractions. Data Story takes these recommendations seriously and stresses the collaborative and social dimension inherent in data and in data practices. Composing Data Story will still remain will still be time-consuming for researchers, and curation practices will still remain an overhead. However, we hope researchers will have the opportunity to gain personal benefits, such as organizing heterogeneous data, structuring relevant findings, analytical reflection, to be used in collaborative discussion, publications, and future work. With the development of this concept, our wish is to promote a smooth transition towards the open science principles while remaining as open as possible and as close as necessary. At present, Data Story remains a conceptual contribution. It has not been deployed or evaluated. However, we plan to develop the work further by testing the idea across a range of different projects. In this way, we hope to refine the concept and gain deeper insights in how we can best support researchers and the recipients of their data. We cannot only predict what the outcome of this process will be, although we can speculate. For instance, innovation of this kind might form the basis of new publication formats in the long term and help incentivize the work of data curation, which is currently largely seen as unrewarding. With this, I end my presentation and I thank you all.